when you start thinking, oh, I'm so stupid, or I'm not qualified, or I don't belong here, you start acting that. You start behaving at work in that way, or not putting in your best because you feel like you don't qualify, you don't belong here. So people often make their actions correspond to their self-attack. That's what happens when you constantly listen to your inner critic, because the reality is that it significantly hinders and holds you back from reaching your fullest potential. The topic of our conversation today is silencing your inner critic, and it's something that each and every one of us have, something many of us have to battle with. It's an important conversation. For those who are joining for the first time, my name is Nikki Verd. I am passionate about unlocking human potential in the age of disruption. I'm the future of work coach as well. I'm the author of the book titled Disrupt Yourself or Be Disrupted. Sometimes we expect change to come from the outside, but usually real change comes from the inside. So the topic of my book is really about self-disruption, especially in the age of technological advancement that we are living in. We have to be able to disrupt ourselves, disrupt our thinking, disrupt the way we're approaching life, the way we're approaching work, disrupt things that we're familiar with so that we can embrace the unfamiliar and be able to, function at our full potential. Because if you are not able to change and evolve as a person, it will be difficult to fully operate, and live life or experience life at your fullest potential. The inner voice, something I've faced in my own life as well, being able to make progress in that area. And I wanted to share, some of the things I've learned along the way. The inner critic can be quite a hindrance when it comes to reaching your full potential. The inner critic constantly whispers negative thoughts and doubts in our minds, making us question our abilities and worthiness. That's really what it is. And this self-doubt often leads to fear of failure and a reluctance to take risks or explore new opportunities. The inner critic creates a very limiting mindset and holds us back from trying new things or pursuing our passions. Right? It is defined as a destructive thought process that interferes with the pursuit of your personal or career goals or business goals, and has an overall negative impact on your life generally. So the inner critic voice, it is that part of you that is turned against you. It is the negative side of your personality that is opposed to your personal growth. That is really what its work and function is about. The inner critic is that voice within you that often fills your mind with self-doubt, negative self-talk, and a constant stream of criticism. It leads to self-sabotage, and it holds you back from personal growth, from moving forward in life, from trying new things, and from achieving what you're capable of achieving. So this inner voice consists of those negative thoughts and beliefs and attitudes that oppose your best interest and diminishes your self-interest. The inner critic doesn't have your best interest at heart. No, it doesn't. This hostile, judgmental advisor, it warns you also about other people, promoting angry and cynical attitude towards people and creating a negative and pessimistic picture of the world. So it doesn't just speak negative things about you as an individual. The inner critic also speaks negative things about people around you, people that are close to you. It suggests things that are not reality, things that are not real. And if you're not careful, you can end up going with those thoughts as though they were reality. So the inner critic, it undermines your ability to interpret events realistically, and it triggers these negative moods and sabotages your pursuit of satisfaction and your pursuit of success and your pursuit of meaning in life. That is really the work of the inner critic. It doesn't have your best interest at heart. The inner critic, it doesn't have my best interest at heart. And some people don't even know the difference. They just feel like any thoughts that come into their minds, they just have to believe it and run with it. And that is really dangerous. And the question that some people usually ask is, where does this critical inner voice come from? These voices, it can come from early childhood experiences, maybe from parents, depending on how you were raised and some of the things that were said, voices that were said to you by your parents. I've heard some parents usually, insult their kids like, you stupid boy, or you stupid girl, or you good for nothing, and things like that. Sometimes these voices from parents become the inner voice of these kids as adults when they grow up. They believe they're stupid, they believe they're useless because they heard it, from their parents or their caregivers when they were much younger. It can also come, it's not always coming from parents, or family. Sometimes it comes from friends as well. It can come from schoolmates. It can come from colleagues or influential adults in your life or in your neighborhood, depending how much time you spend with them, how long you've been around them. Some people went to school and they went through bullying, where kids will say horrible, nasty things to them, and those things that school kids or schoolmates did to them have now become their inner voices. Sometimes it could be from a colleague or from a boss, even, a boss you work under who didn't believe in you and said some pretty mean things to you. Somehow you are not able to overcome that, and you are now carrying that even after leaving the organization or after being on your own, you still carry those voices in your head thinking, oh, this boss said 1, 2, 3 about me, I guess this is who I am. It could come from a life partner or from a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a husband or a wife. If they constantly speak negative things about you, those can become your inner voice, where when you're by yourself, it tells you, okay, this is who you are useless, you are good for nothing. And so these are some of the examples of where these voices come from. You can come from your childhood, you can come from friends, even siblings. Some of us grow up in families where our siblings were really mean. They would say mean things to either the kid brother or the senior brother or the senior sister or the younger one. So all of these things can have an impact in your life, even as an adult, if you are not careful. So in most cases, your inner critics, it picks up these harmful messages from people around you. Sometimes it's your own thoughts as well. Sometimes it is your own doing, but sometimes it is these harmful messages come from people. It also comes from how you interpret events that have happened in your life or around you. So when you work on figuring out where you got these thoughts, it can be the beginning of healing. It can be the beginning of silencing that inner voice. It can be the beginning of overcoming that inner voice. But it is important for you to identify, where did these voices come from? Are these my own thoughts? Are these my parents speaking? Is this my partner speaking? Is this my brother or sibling speaking? Is this a voice from my teacher back in the day? Is this a voice from my colleague back in the day? Is this a voice from my boss? Where are these inner voices, these inner critical voices coming from? So it is important to identify where these voices come from before you even embark on how do you silence it and how do you overcome it. And some example or common examples of these critical voices, I've mentioned a few, but things like you will never be successful, you're so stupid, these are some examples of your inner critical voice. Things like maybe you're at work, you're constantly thinking to yourself, I'm not qualified, you're thinking, I don't belong here, those type of thoughts. You're not attractive, you keep thinking to yourself, I'm not like other people, I'm not likable, people don't like me, or I'll fail as always. Those are things that become your inner voice. You start thinking to yourself, well, no one appreciates how hard I work here. I'm under so much pressure. I don't think I can handle this. Sometimes it can be around your relationship. You can start imagining things or saying things. Oh, he doesn't really care about me, or she doesn't really care about me, or she's just using me, or she's just here for my money. Or you start thinking, oh, you're better off on your own. You start thinking to yourself, I cannot open up my heart in terms of a relationship. I would just get hurt if I dare trust him, or if I dare trust her, or if I dare give him my heart. So these thoughts generally will discourage you from doing anything that is in your best interest. It will sabotage your relationships. You can sabotage your relationships with your colleagues as well, sabotage your career, sabotage your business, sabotage your personal growth. So if you listen to these destructive points of view and believe what they are telling you, that is when it really becomes difficult for you to overcome them. But instead, you start acting on them because you believe them, and you start thinking that this is reality. Meanwhile, it is not. Because when you think that, someone doesn't care about you, what happens? You start acting as though they don't care about you. You start projecting that to people. If you think, my colleague hates me, or my boss doesn't like me, if that's how your thinking process is, you start acting it out without really investigating. Is this true? Is this real? When you start thinking, I'm so stupid, I'm not qualified, or I don't belong here, you start acting that. You start behaving at work in that way, or not putting in your best because you feel like you don't qualify, you don't belong here. And these are things that personally I have faced in my own journey. I told a story one of the sessions we had, where I was sharing that when I eventually published my book, it was very difficult for me to introduce myself as an author, because I felt like I don't even qualify to be among writers or to be among those that have published books. I still had that thing in mind that no, I don't qualify. But slowly I had to overcome that. When the idea for me to write my book came, I discouraged myself. I told myself that I'm not that smart to write a book. People who write books are really smart people. And I told myself, no way, I don't qualify. I gave myself 1,000 reasons why I don't qualify to write a book. But as time went on, the idea of writing the book will not leave me. And I had to find a way to overcome those inner voices, and those inner critics that kept telling me I don't qualify. Eventually, I was able to put the book down, and I am so glad that I did put pen to paper, eventually published. I went through all of those fears, but I did not allow them to stop me. It's still a journey, but somehow I'm not where I used to be. I've made so much progress. I think to myself, how many people have these great ideas? Maybe they have a book inside of them. They have a business inside of them. They have something amazing inside of them, but they just cannot birth it into the world. I was that person who felt like, no, anyone else can write a book, but not this Nikki, But eventually, I had to overcome that. So if you're listening to me and you have ideas inside of you and you feel like you don't qualify, I just want to let you know I have been there. I've been there myself, but I had to walk through that. Even after the book came out, like I've just mentioned, introducing myself as an author was another battle that I had to fight mentally. So the impact of the inner critic can be really devastating, because it really stops you from living life at your full potential. We now live in a technological era. How many people are slowing themselves down because they are not willing to learn about technology, because they are telling themselves, I am not a tech person. I don't belong in this tech world. This is too much for me. I don't know anything about technology, so I'm not going to go out there to even make an attempt to learn or understand the basics of technology. That's your inner critic. That's your inner voice trying to sabotage your ability to really evolve and align yourself with where the world is going. So people often make their actions correspond to their self-attack. That's what happens when you constantly listen to your inner critic, because the reality is that it significantly hinders and holds you back from reaching your fullest potential in several ways. It creates self-doubt. That's one way of it doing it. You constantly doubt yourself. If you listen to the quick story I've just shared, I was doubting myself. Can I really write a book? That's what the inner critic, it makes you doubt your abilities, your decisions, your actions. This self-doubt can lead to hesitation. It can lead to procrastination. It can lead to missed opportunities. It can prevent you from taking risk and pursuing your goals or your passions or your career wholeheartedly. Another point is that it creates this fear of failure. The inner critics often magnifies the fear of failure. Yes, the fear of failure is real and is something that each and every one of us will go through, but the inner critics, it magnifies it and it makes it feel like it's the end of the world. It highlights on the potential mistakes. The inner critics highlights on the potential shortcomings. It highlights on the embarrassment of not succeeding. It highlights on the negative things that will happen to you if you fail. And because of that fear, it ends up really paralyzing you and preventing you from trying new things or pursuing new dreams or whatever you want to explore. And another point is that the inner critics, it requires you to be perfect. So there's this mindset of a perfectionist that you take on. Some people sort of wear that as a badge of honor to be a perfectionist. It's not really true. The inner critic fosters this perfectionist mindset where nothing you do seems good enough. You criticize yourself for everything you do. And even other people, when they do their best, you criticize them. Why? Because your inner critic wants things to be perfect. Perfection is not an ideal standard to set for yourself. So this can lead to overworking. It can lead to burnout. It can lead to constant feelings of dissatisfaction. It can lead to so many things that are not positive for your career. Perfectionism can also stifle creativity and innovation because you are afraid to make mistakes. You are afraid to try new things. People who are creative and innovative, being a perfectionist is not what they're aiming for. Another way that it hinders or holds you back from your full potential is that the inner critic causes you to compare yourself with others. And this leads to feelings of jealousy, inferiority complex, unworthiness, further deteriorating you from pursuing your own goals. The truth about life is that there will always be someone bigger, there will always be someone better, there will always be someone more beautiful, there will always be someone more talented. So if you live your life constantly comparing yourself to people, then there is never going to be a time where you are at peace or where you are truly living a happy life, because there is always be someone better out there than you. There's someone with more money, there's someone in a better organization, and that is just the way life is set up. No matter how much you climb the ladder, once you climb and think you are right now at the top, look up, you'll see that there are still people above you. And that is just the reality. Sometimes we need to admit and accept, okay, this is how life is set up. But the inner critic, it doesn't want to see life like that. It just feels like you are losing. You're constantly losing simply because the few people are ahead of you, simply because people you know are ahead of you. It makes you feel like you are a loser, and that is not true. The inner critic contributes also to imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, that's a topic in itself, but I will just touch on it here because despite evidence of your competence, the inner critics makes you feel like you are a fraud, who doesn't deserve the achievement you have so far, or who doesn't deserve to be where you are, or who doesn't deserve to have that business, or who doesn't deserve to work in that organization. It makes you feel like you are a fraud who does not deserve all the accomplishment and everything you've worked hard to achieve. That is the work of the inner critic, which magnifies imposter syndrome that so many people also are struggling with. Personally, in my own life, I've also struggled with that, where I felt like, oh my God, I don't belong here. Sometimes I see my name on the list of speakers in terms of events where I was supposed to give a keynote, and I'm paralyzed, and I'm like, oh my God, these are really high profile speakers. Maybe I don't belong in this group, So I've had those thoughts, that imposter syndrome, where I had to fight and literally speak out loud to myself like, hey, I belong here. I belong to this group. I belong to be in this room. I belong to this set of speakers. I belong to be among them as well. You challenge those thoughts, because if you allow them, they can fully start manifesting as though it's reality. Meanwhile, it is not. So it makes the inner critic is harsh and is unforgiving. It's lacking in self-compassion. This prevents you from treating yourself with the same kind of kindness and compassion and understanding that you would offer a friend. So without self-compassion, setbacks and failures can feel like it's really the end of the world. It can feel really devastating. And instead of you looking at it like this is an opportunity to grow, you just feel like this is the end of the world. The constant criticism from your inner critic, it can lead you to be very risk aversion. You might avoid situations where you are afraid that if you try this thing, you will fail and you will look stupid, or you will be judged by people. And so something that you could have tried, something with a lot of potential for growth, you avoid it because your inner voice is telling you that you don't qualify, you don't belong here. And that is something you need to look out for. Let's get into a few steps in which you can take to overcome or to silence these inner critics. So the first step, it is that you practice self-awareness. Start by recognizing when your inner critic is active, because it's not always on 24/7. There are times you feel like you can take on the world. There are times you feel like you are on top of the world. There are times you feel like you're standing, 10 foot tall. But suddenly things change. That is when now the inner critic is active. Pay attention to when you suddenly slip into a bad mood or become upset or become angry. Often these negative shifts in emotions are a result of that critical inner voice. So if you are fine this week or fine yesterday and the next day you just feel horrible, if you are fine in the morning and later in the afternoon you just feel horrible, investigate what thoughts did you entertain at that moment? What thoughts came into your mind? Did suddenly your inner critic jump in and say, oh, look at you. You think you're smart. No, you're not. You're stupid. And then it reminds you of maybe something someone said 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Then it suddenly reminds you of what your boss said 5 years ago, or what your parent or what one of your parents said to you when you were a child. Suddenly those shift, that mood that suddenly just shift. Don't just brush over it. Sit and ask yourself, but where did this come from? So the first step is that awareness. Check your moods. When do they change? What are the thoughts that triggers that? What are the situations that triggers those bad moods, those angry moods? Those things that just make you suddenly become upset. That is the first step. to silencing that inner voice. Because if you are unaware, self-awareness is powerful. So don't allow the inner critic to have the steering wheel. Your self-awareness will know when to kick it off and take back control, take the steering wheel and say, hey, this is my life. You are not going to drive it for me. This is my car. You are not going to drive it for me. So self-awareness is key. Without self-awareness, anything else you're talking about here will not work. So the next step in overcoming or silencing the inner critic is challenge your negative thoughts, right? When you notice negative self-talk, question the validity of these thoughts. Ask yourself if there's any concrete evidence to support what you're feeling. Don't just go with it. If it says you're stupid, ask, is there any concrete evidence that I'm stupid? If it says you are not qualified, ask, is there any concrete evidence to support that I'm not qualified for this role? Often you will find that these thoughts are just exaggerated inner critic doing its thing. Challenge those thoughts. The next point is that you should reframe and refocus. Once you've identified negative thoughts, reframe them in a more balanced and realistic way. Instead of saying, well, I would definitely fail, you could say, okay, I'll do my best and I'll learn from this experience. That's you reframing the situation. Instead of going with that thought that, oh, you will definitely fail as you've always. No. Reframe it. Rephrase your thoughts. Reframe them. Refocus. In doing that, you'll find that you will have a better chance of overcoming or silencing those thoughts. Another one is that you should limit your social comparison. We live in a world today where at the click of a button, the whole world can flunk in front of you. In the past, you could only compete with your neighbor or with the people around your local environment or your community, your immediate community. But now you could sit here and become sad or depressed because of something you saw someone in China wearing, or someone in UK, someone in America, and you are affected by that. Avoid constantly comparing yourself to others, because this will trigger feelings of inadequacy, failure, and all of that. Instead, focus on your own progress and growth, because you are on your own journey, they are on their own journey. So if you allow those things to take over, the inner critic is gonna eat you for breakfast. It will just feast on it. Another way that you can silence the inner critic is to use affirmations. Replace negative self-talk with positive affirmations that reinforces your strength, your abilities. Create positive affirmations that counteract your negative self-talk. If the inner voice is telling you you're ugly, look in the mirror and tell yourself, I am beautiful, I am attractive, I am handsome. If the inner voice is telling you you're stupid, say no. Look in the mirror, use affirmation, tell yourself, I am the most talented, I am qualified, I belong here, I am part of this organization, I am doing my best, I am contributing the best that I know I can with the tools and the resources that I have, and I know there is more for me, there's more room for me to grow, there's more room for me to elevate myself. So don't allow yourself to drown, with those inner voices. Practice gratitude. That's another way of silencing that. Instead of comparing yourself and looking at what others have that you don't have, regularly list things that you are grateful for. Instead of counting other people's blessings, learn to count your own blessings. Learn to look at what you have. Look at where you were 5 years ago. Look at where you are now, and appreciate and be grateful for the little progress you might have made. Be grateful for that. So find things that help you to express and practice gratitude. This can shift your focus from what you lack, to what you have, fostering a more positive mindset. Practice self-compassion. Treat yourself with kindness, understanding, especially in moments of failure or setback. Remember that making mistakes is an integral part of life. It is part of the package. You can't make it in life without mistakes, so don't beat yourself down. Another way to silence the inner critic is that you set realistic expectations for yourself. Unrealistic expectations can fuel your inner critic. So set achievable goals and recognize that perfection isn't necessary. It's not even attainable. Another way for you to silence the inner critic is that you should celebrate your achievement. Focus on your success and your achievements, no matter how small they may seem. Acknowledging your progress can help counterbalance negative self-talk. Another way is for you to focus on your strength. We all have strength and our weaknesses, but focus on your strength. Shift your attention towards your strengths and your accomplishments. Remind yourself of your past successes and the positive qualities that you have. Remind yourself of the things you are yet to achieve, of the amazing future that is ahead of you. It is possible for you to take your life back. It is possible for you to overcome this self-negative talk or this inner critic. But it's a journey. It's not going to be easy. It's a a journey that I am still walking, and I'm still working on myself daily, but I am not where I used to be. And that is why I saw this is an important conversation, because I remember those days, how I used to beat myself down, So when you become conscious of what this voice is telling you, you can stop it from ruining your life. The challenge is to identify and flush out this integral part. To do this, be on the lookout for when you slip into a bad mood or when you become upset. Investigate what caused the shift, what happened. The fact that your mood shifted from feeling optimistic and relaxed to feeling down and suddenly irritable is probably a sign that you are interpreting the events through your critical inner voice. And your critical inner voice, again, it doesn't have your best interest at heart. So when you interpret life, you interpret events through that critical inner voice, you are setting yourself up for failure. So these are some of the steps that you can take to be able to silence that critical voice. But for some people, their own issues may be so deep that they may need extra help. And with that, I normally would suggest seek professional help. Maybe you need to talk to a therapist if you're struggling, or maybe you have really traumatic experiences where you cannot deal with this on your own. So talking to a professional, a therapist, that's not my area of expertise, by the way. So talking to a real professional in that regard will help you. But it is necessary for you to be aware that your inner critic doesn't have your best interests at heart, and so that you are aware of this and don't project those thoughts as though they were reality in your own life.